my very good friend Zach. We've not met in person, but I think the first time we met was we got in touch 2016 when you did a review paper on organizational commitment, where you
Yeah.
highlighted effective commitment as the core essence of organizational commitment, which I happen to have cited that paper. And I guess you are one of the reviewers of the paper because on ResearchGate, you told me you like to read a paper once it's published. So, yeah, thanks so much, Zach. Since then, I think I've been in touch with you via email, and I'm glad that you, as a matter of fact, accepted my invitation to present as far as this month's webinar is concerned. So,
Sure.
ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you Zach. Zach is a leadership expert. He helps leaders enable the daily experience of purpose, meaningfulness, and mattering. And Zach is a researcher and a honorary fellow of psychology in the Center for Meaning and Purpose at Colorado State University. And he is also the author of one of the best leadership books, The Invincible Leader: Transform Your Life, Work, and Organization with the Purpose of Authentic Purpose. Zach also advises leaders in companies. Equally important, he also advises leaders in nonprofit schools around the world on the practices of positive and purposeful leadership, mattering, engagement, and meaningful work. As you can see, that's the display of his book, The Invincible Leader. And I would entreat all of you to get a copy because I personally have read a aspect of the e-version, and I can tell you that it's a very, very insightful and inspiring book. Yep. So Zach is a PhD holder, and I must also say that he won the Best Paper Award in his category as far as this year's Academy of Management conference is concerned. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you Zach Mercario, who is going to present on the topic, the power and the practice of purposeful leadership. Thank you, Zach. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad someone reads my papers.
Yeah.
So that's nice, and that someone reads my book. That's always nice. You never know
Exactly.
where anything goes when you put it out into the world. So
Yeah. Yeah.
everyone listening, put what you have out there, and you
Mhm.
never know who's going to read it, who's going to look at it, who's going to be inspired by it. What I'd like for you to do is
Yep.
if everybody could just if you have access to the chat, if you could
Yep.
just type your name, first name maybe,
Exactly.
and
Okay.
one word that describes how you're feeling right now, whatever time of day it is for you. Right
Hmm.
now I'm in the Rocky Mountains here in Colorado, and it is the mid-morning. I'm feeling pretty caffeinated. I had my coffee. So maybe just your name, one word, how you're doing today, and then we'll get going. I just like to hear how everybody's doing.
Okay. Good. It's
Michael,
almost
feeling sleepy.
yeah, because it's 12:01 a.m. here in Perth, Australia. So
Yeah.
I should be
Oh,
sleeping by
wow. Yeah.
now. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you have the planet behind you.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you're here doing this. Cool. Excited. Yeah. So keep it coming. I just want to, encourage you. There's going to be a couple times on the chat. I'm going to ask you to maybe input some things just to get you thinking. And if you
Yep.
don't want to, that's fine. Just read what other people are saying. But let's get started here. I want to overview what we know about this idea of purposeful leadership, why even talk about purpose, what it is, and then leave some time for questions and a discussion at the end. So let's, yeah, feeling grateful. Cool. Thank you all right. So let's just jump in here. And I wanted you to think about this question. Think about the last 7 days of your life. And I want you to think about which moment gave you the greatest sense of purpose, whatever purpose means to you. So think about the last 7 days of your life and which moment has given you the greatest sense of purpose, whatever purpose means to you. And what I'd like for you to do is, if you're inclined to, is just type into the chat what is 1 to 2 words that describe what you were doing when you experienced a sense of purpose. The last 7 days, which moment has given you the greatest sense of purpose, and then whatever that means to you right now, and then type into the chat 1 to 2 words that describe what you were doing in that moment. So go ahead. I'll wait for a couple to come in. Michael, you're going to start us off here.
Yep.
Yeah. What were you doing? Now think about that moment. So purpose, when you experienced it last 7 days, what were you doing in that moment? Cool. Reading. Thanks, Emmanuel. I'll wait for a couple more to come in. This is a really powerful question to ask. Oftentimes, this idea of purpose can be so out there, big vision, running data analysis, good. Got accepted into the editorial board of a journal hosted under Emerald. Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
Good. So a sense of achievement, of being part of something bigger, up and doing, felt results, plans, good. Good. So when we think about this idea of purpose, oftentimes when we ask this question, yeah, new projects growing, we get answers like progress or doing some meaningful activity that benefits someone else, seeing new projects grow. It's usually something bigger than the self, something outside of ourselves is where we derive purpose from. While it may be an achievement, it's an achievement so that something else, like getting a big journal and editorial board so that we can contribute in the way that we were meant to. Almost never does anybody say, oh, I felt a sense of purpose when I cashed that check in my bank account, or when I got that direct deposit in my bank account, or when I just got this specific job title, or when I acquired or got or achieved some particular thing that has no relation to my own meaningfulness. And what we know about purpose is this. So when I talk about purpose today, I'm talking about the reason for which something is done or created, or for which something exists. So purpose asks us, of what use are we to the world? Yeah, thank you. Someone came in and said they affected change in their own country. That's amazing. But purpose is the reason for which something is done or for which something exists, something's use or usefulness. So purpose is that contribution. It's your unique contribution that you make. And when we think about that idea of contribution, it's important to think about how we lead with that contribution, because we all have purpose, but there's a big difference between having purpose and being purposeful. So again, having purpose is that bigger contribution where our strengths make a difference to other people, but being purposeful is contribution-centered thinking, being, and doing. So how do we approach our lives and our work and our companies and our schools with a contribution-focused mindset? How is what I'm going to do right now going to affect other human beings? And I want to share with you how powerful that can be. So again, what we're talking about today is being purposeful, which is this idea of contribution-centered thinking, being, and doing. So in one of my research studies, I researched janitors at a local university. So these are janitors that clean the university dormitories and residence halls for the students living in them. And I was researching what made work meaningful for them. And who you're seeing on the screen right now, this is a janitor. Her name was Ellen. She was near homelessness before she got her job as a janitor. And when she got her job as a janitor, one leader came up to her and described the word custodian for her, actually got out a dictionary and said, this is why you're here. And custodian in the US is defined as someone who takes responsibility over something. And she said that since that moment, she realized that while she just got this job for a paycheck, she realized that she had responsibility over something. And what we know from people who experience purpose and meaningfulness regularly in their lives and their work, they tend to be able to see the impact of what they're doing, no matter how small and routine it might be. For example, Ellen said that she did not like cleaning the bathrooms of the university dormitories on Monday mornings after the weekend, right? She didn't like it. It was an unpleasant task. But what she said is because she knew that her responsibility was taking care of the building and everyone in it, she said that every time she went into the bathroom to clean it, she would say to herself, I'm cleaning this so that the kids don't get sick. So that is what we find in thousands of interviews with people. When they experience meaningfulness, they're able to adopt a purposeful mindset. So think about what you're doing today or what you have to do tomorrow or a task you're having difficulty doing, and just add a so that after it. I'm doing this so that what? And if you'll see here, she's knitting hats, and she did this because she knitted hats for all of the students that lived in the dormitory, the university dormitory. And she did this so that when she walked to her car at the end of the day and she saw students wearing her hats in the winter, she would be reminded of the impact that she made. This is called, right, being purposeful, approaching our everyday work and life with a mindset that links it to the effect we want to have, to our impact. And that's my kid. She actually knitted a hat for him. That's my 5-year-old. And she also knitted a hat for our governor of Colorado as well. So she's a little bit famous around here. But what we find is that when people have this mindset, when they design their lives and their approach to their everyday with their contribution at the forefront, it results in people not only feeling better, but doing better. This is a company that I work with. It's a local company. They're actually a car wash company. And this is Justin in the picture here. Justin is the chief operating officer of the company. And I remember having coffee with him and he said, Zach, we don't have a purpose. We just wash cars to make money. And I said, I want you to think about it a little bit. And so he went back and he thought about it and he said, I realized it. I realized what our purpose is. No one gets up in the morning and says, I want to work at a car wash. Oftentimes people who work at the car wash, it's their first job, or they didn't graduate their secondary, the high school, or they, are looking for another job, but had to get this job. And so he said, our purpose has to be to prepare people for the future and provide for the community. Because if we're a place where somebody's getting their first job, it's our responsibility to prepare them for the future. Now, he didn't just say it, they prove it. So if you're a car wash attendant, so actually washing a car, he helps people set up a retirement plan for them. Each person is giving a personal development plan that helps them to fund their higher education that they want to go into after this job. And his number one goal is 80% retention. That means all employees kept for at least 1 year so that he can impact them. Now, the result of being obsessed with preparing people for their future and providing for their community is that they wash over 1 million cars per year. The average in the United States for a tunnel car washing system is about 300,000 cars. So they do 3 times the average. They get people from around the world that want to work at this car wash. And this is the result of their purpose, not their purpose. In fact, I always say that anybody can copy what you do and how you do it. But in my experience, no one can copy at your core why you are. No one can copy the contribution that you want to make through what you do. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, but I think it's really important that this company decided to be purposeful, not just have some values and statements on the wall. So if you're starting a company, if you're learning how to be a leader as a student, if you're working in a company right now as a leader, asking yourself, do we try to compete on what we do and how we do it? Or do we really double down and focus on our unique contribution, our unique story? And as you know, as this global pandemic was happening here in the United States, we shut down everything. And it was a big hurt for businesses. And one of the things that this car wash company did is the first meeting they had when everything shut down is that all the team got together and started getting food together for employees who might be in need. And this is a text message I got from the chief operating officer. And it said that from pay to food to shelter and every what if scenario, the first concern is will our employees have enough food if we have to stop doing shifts or lay people off? And he said he was the leader of this organization, but he said the best part is the team led this without me. So this is the power when a purpose is clear. And one of the reasons why my book is titled The Invisible Leader is that what we're finding in the research on organizational behavior is that the most powerful leaders in organizations aren't necessarily people. It's a shared common purpose and sense of contribution. And what I've been finding, especially in working with businesses right now, is that the most successful companies are not asking, how can I get through this? They're asking, who needs me to get through this? So leaders who are going through this change right now, well, they don't just say, how can I get through this? How can I survive? They're talking, who needs me to get through this? Putting their people, their stakeholders, their customers, the human beings that are inevitably at the end of what they do first. So you could think about this for yourself, and think right now, like if you're going through a difficult time, think about this question of, who needs me to get through this? And do I think about the impact that I need to have regularly? Because that impact is ultimately your purpose. So before I get into a couple practices that you may want to implement, and then we'll open it up to Q&A, I want to just make sure you have a clear understanding of why purpose works. That it's not just kind of me sitting here in my office telling you that this works. That purpose scientifically optimizes us. And one of the first reasons is that when we think about our contribution, our brains and bodies are optimized. So we have a part of our brain that's wired to contribute to one another. UCLA Semel Center for Neuroscience finds that when we do think about our impact or contribution on others, or when we actively help someone, we get a boost of these neurotransmitters. They're called dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. They are the three neurotransmitters controlled for mood, so how you feel, movement, how you actually do what you're doing, and motivation. Now, if anybody is a running fan, one of my favorite stories is from the 2018 Boston Marathon here in the US. This is Desiree Linden. She's the women's winner of the Boston Marathon in 2018. And if you look at this picture on the screen, you'll notice that it was rainy, it was windy, it was about 43 degrees Fahrenheit in Boston, terrible running conditions. And the television cameras caught Desiree on camera, actually going off the course, getting sick and coming back on. And she decided very early on in that race that it was not her race day, that she was not feeling it, that she was going to drop out at about mile 10. And that's when she made a decision that changed everything. She saw an elite group of runners out in the front of the pack. And she said, she went up to them and she said, hey, if you need anything, let me know. I'll block wind for you. I'll grab water cups for you. Whatever you need, let me know. She said about 3 miles after she stopped thinking about herself and started thinking about her impact on these other runners, that she miraculously got her legs back. She went on to win the Boston Marathon. And in a post-race interview with her sports psychologist and Runner's World magazine, she said that in all of my athletic training up to this point in my life, and if anybody's a running fan or a professional sports fan, you know that it's like a science. What you put into your body, you know what it will do to your body and what the outputs will be. And she said that no training up to that point has had the same effect on her and her body than when she started thinking about this bigger impact, this bigger purpose. And neuroscientists and sports psychologists weren't surprised. When we can disassociate from ourselves and start thinking about impact, research finds we become better. In fact, we're suboptimal as human beings when we're not on purpose. And so purpose also predicts resilience. Angela Duckworth, in her book called Grit, she did a wide-ranging study on how resilience, which is perseverance over time, what and one of the key predictors of resilience was having a bigger sense of purpose. If you look at this graph right here on the vertical axis, you'll find this grit scale. You could go online and just search grit scale, Angela Duckworth, and you can take that. And what she found was that when things are going well for us, like the things that we want, right? We have enough money, we have the job we want, we have all this stuff, this pleasure line, it actually does nothing to increase our resilience for when things won't go well.
Mhm.
One of the only key predictors of resilience was having a bigger sense of purpose. So having a bigger sense of a goal that was related to the legacy and impact we wanted to leave. And why is that? Well, if you look at the story I just told you of Desiree Linden, it optimizes our brains and our bodies. I mean, if you just stopped right now and asked that question, who needs me right now? Chances are you'll get a boost of those neurotransmitters that make us feel better and move better. And then the final piece of why I even start with purpose when I'm working with leaders is that purpose is more durable than achievement. Purpose is more durable than achievement. The problem with just being motivated by results or by getting a thing is the fact that you can achieve the results or get the thing. And then what? Well, then we're left to make a new goal. And then what? Psychologists, we call that the arrival fallacy. That when you arrive at a goal, when you get the result, then what? Then you're always in this cycle of not good enough yet. Oftentimes as humans, we live in this if-then argument, right? If I get to the end of my work shift, then I'll be happy. In the US here, it's if I get to the weekend, then I'll be happy. If I get this job title, then I'll be happy. And the problem is that we can get to the then. And then what? Purpose fills that. Purpose is a long-term pulling force, whereas results and just being motivated by achievements gives us short pushes. They're important. They're indicators of how well we're contributing, but they're always short-term. And so purpose is not always pleasurable, but it lasts longer than pleasure does alone. So when we think about that, we get to the top of the mountain, and it's always like, which way to the next mountain? And we get into this cycle of unfulfillment. And companies and organizations fall into this trap too, where they forget that every effect, every result, every financial indicator of success is mediated through a human being who's making a contribution. No business exists, no organization exists unless it fills a meaningful human need, solves a problem, fills a human desire. But what we see happening in organizations often, and with our own selves, is that we try to get an effect, the result, by pursuing the effect. And what we know is that no effect exists without a cause. Purposeful organizations and purposeful leaders obsess about and focus relentlessly on their cause, the contribution, and they trust that the effects will follow. And that's hard because in our brains, we just want short-term gratification. We just want the result. We want the goal. We want the money. We want this, but we forget that our ability to get is directly correlated with our ability to give, what value we provide. So purposeful leaders obsessively focus on their contribution and they trust that the effects will follow. Now, what can happen over time is you may be sitting here, you may be an entrepreneur, you may be a student, you may be someone in business right now who says, I have a good understanding of why we exist and I know what we do. And typically this is what happens, at the beginning of our careers or our companies or our journeys or wherever we are, if we start something new, we know why we're doing it. We know what we're doing. But what happens is that when life happens or an external pressure happens and we have to react to it, we start taking our attention away from our why and focusing it on just the what. How do I react to this? How do I get through this? What do I need to do? And as we eliminate our attention and our ability to pay attention to our why, we also eliminate the very motivational energy we need to respond to the thing we're responding to. And so what happens over time is that we can keep reacting. We react. We're focusing on what we do. We focus on what we do, how we do it. And we forget why we even exist, the contribution we exist to make, and ultimately our ultimate differentiator. And I've seen this happen time and time again with organizations and companies that they don't fail because of a lack of strategy. They fail because they forgot their contribution. And so let's get into how we can do this. I want to just introduce you to 3 key practices. And then if you have questions about any of these afterwards, let me know. And I'll also put my email address in the chat at the end if you'd like to email for some more depth on each of these. Each of these areas you can go into incredible depth with, but I'm just going to give an overview of some of these key practices. So, how do we lead with purpose? How do we become a purposeful leader? One who is not just results obsessed, but is contribution obsessed and trusts that the effects will follow. And the first place to start is with yourself and your own mindset and how you think about your life and your world and who you are and what your legacy is. And it's developing this, what I call a purposeful mindset. Now, I've had my own struggles with this, right? I used to last year, I had this very bad habit. I would wake up, I would look at my phone, look at my calendar, and I would say to myself, what do I have to do today? And if you think about your own voice in your head as a motivational speaker, that's not very motivational, right? Oh gosh, what am I going to do today? Instead, what I started doing as I was researching purpose and motivation is I started thinking about, what if I looked at my phone and I got up in the morning and the first thing I did was not say, what do I have to do today? But I started asking the question, how is what I'm going to do today going to impact other people? And I just started right here in a journal. I started naming who the people I would be impacting that day would be. And it was a little bit hard at first. I mean, because it's not natural. Usually you just want to get into the day, get stuff done. But as I did that, everything took on new meaning. The stakes were raised, that what I was doing that day affected other people. The reality is that you can't not matter. Everything that you do has an effect on another person. When you can take that captive, it starts creating this idea that, yes, I matter and what I do matters. And just those small shifts can cultivate a purposeful mindset. And it usually happens in our mind. Research finds that when we think about and what we talk about in our minds affects how we perform and how we go about our day. This was from a study on the effects of motivational self-talk on someone's strength lifting weights. And what they found was that if you look at the motivational group on the top, this was a group that was asked to repeat motivational words to themselves as they were lifting weights. On the vertical axis, that's the energy output in joules. So if you look at the motivational group, the group in the instructional group, the group that was asked to self-talk positively, they literally became stronger. The same thing is true with when we think about mindset and the stories that we tell ourselves and the questions that we ask. This is my 5-year-old. He is in preschool right now. And I did an experiment on him. He was waking up every day. He was not wanting to go to preschool. He didn't want to get ready for the day. And on the car ride home, instead of asking him, how did you do today? How was today? What did you do today? Which didn't really get me any answers. I started asking these 2 questions. Who did you help today? And who helped you today? And I started asking him those questions every single day. There was no punishment associated with it if he didn't answer. I just kept asking him every day. And what happened after about a couple of weeks of picking him up and asking him this question is he started thinking about, oh, well, I helped my friend Liza pick up the toys, or I helped my friend build a Lego tower. And one day he came into the car and he came home and he said, Daddy, I can't think of who helped me today. I'm going to have to I'll look harder tomorrow. And I can tell you that after that, he didn't complain about going to school. That conversation was different. And so the questions we ask ourselves can change what we pay attention to and alter our perceptions. And so we can ask some better questions. Like, for example, instead of asking, what do I have to do today? You might ask, how is what I'm going to do today going to impact other people? Instead of asking this question, what should I do with my life? Which is a common one, especially if you're a student here, asking, what should my life do for others? Because when we ask, what should I do with my life? What business should I start? We quickly limit our possibilities. We develop a step-by-step path. But when we ask, what should my life do for others? Our possibilities of contribution expand. And it expands our attention because as you go forth and ask this question, what contribution can I make? Opportunities are always out there. But when you just ask, what should I do? What should I do? Our attention and our options often narrow. Even when you ask each other questions, ask better questions. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? People ask this all the time. What kind of impact do you want to have made 5 years from now? Instead of what's your ideal job, asking people what problems do you want to solve with your strengths? This reframe is powerful. If you interview people for your company, and ask them questions that will increase their motivation and their sense of meaningfulness and purpose, instead of where do you see yourself in 5 years, which asks them to think about everywhere else except where they are right now. And what's powerful about this is when we start thinking about this, we start to craft a purposeful approach. And what we know in the research is that when people experience meaningfulness in what they're doing, they are able to answer 3 questions. And these 3 questions are, what would happen to a human being if I did not do what I'm doing right now? So think about a task you have to do today. What would happen to a human being if you did not do it? They are able to answer the question, what outcome it makes possible. So what's the bigger outcome that I'm part of creating? And then the third question is, which of my strengths can I use to do it more? So when we start asking these questions about our tasks, about our life, we actually start knowing more about ourselves. Where are our strengths most needed? What is our contribution? And we start creating the conditions for what researchers call meaningfulness, which is a key predictor of motivation. Oftentimes we try to get motivated by to do something by just saying, I'm going to get motivated, instead of thinking about what comes before motivation, which is knowing why it matters. It's very easy for nothing to matter to someone who doesn't believe that they matter. So this is a powerful framework of thinking about, hey, even right now, what are you going to do today? How is it going to impact other human beings? What outcome will it make possible? And which one of your strengths can you use to do it? If you're a leader, you might use this to delegate tasks. Instead of telling someone what to do or how to do it, first show them why it matters. If you're writing job descriptions, make sure every job description can answer these 3 questions. What you do over time is you start creating the conditions for meaningfulness. Because ultimately, if you're a leader and you're trying to motivate people, including yourself, that almost always fails. But what does work is creating the conditions for people to motivate themselves. And that's what this framework can do. Another key tactic here is to tell yourself better stories. So one of the reasons why I asked you to think about a time when you experience purpose is to give yourself more data about your own impact and your own meaning. This idea of telling ourselves better stories and telling each other better stories of the impact that they make was revealed to me. I was working with a client, and these were people who worked at a distribution center. And what they did was they took small small widgets, electronic widgets, and they distributed them to a company that manufactured MRI machines, and then sent those MRI machines out to be distributed to hospitals. And I went in to work with this company, and these were all distribution center managers, and they were miserable. I mean, you could just feel it. They had just had a really bad financial quarter. And when you live by results, you die by results. And you could tell this group was just dead. And I asked them, why are you even here? Why don't you just leave this conference right now? And the supervisor who hired me was kind of glaring at me in the background. And then a woman in the front raised her hand, and she started crying a little bit. And she said, I've been here for 13 years and nobody's ever asked me why I'm here before, apart from what I do or what I get in return for what I do. And she said, I'm realizing right now why my job exists. I was diagnosed with cancer last month, and I was in an MRI machine, and I looked up at the MRI machine and I saw a logo of this MRI machine. And I remember that logo on the boxes in our distribution centers and in our warehouse. And she said this to the whole group. She said, I realized, and I'm realizing right now, that my job has existed for the last 13 years to save my own life. You talk about an antidote to disengagement. That room changed. So making sure that you're collecting and telling the story of your and your work's impact, both to yourself and others, is a hallmark of purposeful leadership. This is Dr. Turner. He's a radiologist in Israel. And he did a study where he worked with radiologists who work from home, and they get scans and they read the scans and they diagnose the scans and they send those scans back to the doctors to give the diagnosis. And what he did is he took one group of scans and he sent it to a group of radiologists. And all he did differently was attach a headshot of the patient to the scan. The other group, he sent to a control group and he didn't put the headshot of a patient on the scan. What he found was that the group of radiologists that saw the headshot on average wrote 25% longer interpretive findings and found almost double the amount of incidental findings. These were things that would be important for the patient's future prognosis on the scan than those who did not see the patient's face. So that whole idea, you may have heard it, of put a face to the name. Bring the human being that your work inevitably impacts back into your work. Whether even if you're in school right now, think about the subject that you're learning and ask yourself, why does this subject exist? How does it help impact other human beings? Who are those human beings? And when we're able to tell stories and remind ourselves of the human impact of what we're doing, it's incredibly powerful. In fact, Professor Adam Grant at the Wharton School did a study and found that just hearing one story of the benefit of our work on others can result in a 400% increase in productivity and motivation. The other key practice is to do this for other people. Give people affirmation around you of how they matter, the difference that they make. I often say, instead of telling someone good job, show them that they make a difference. And one of my favorite ways to do this is a very simple framework. So anytime you're about to show affirmation or give feedback or give someone positive praise, make sure you describe to them when the event happened, the actual behavior that you observed, and then share with them the story of the difference that it made. What was the impact on you? What was the impact on someone else? And if you have to give negative feedback, make sure instead of just saying, hey, fix this, you show them the potential impact of a new behavior. Again, being a purposeful leader is not about doing some big thing, right? It's about, in these everyday moments, how do we recenter on our impact and then help other people see their impact? And then finally, as I've mentioned before, diversify your goals. So Jennifer Crocker, she is a researcher at the University of Michigan, and she did a study and she wanted to see how people felt when they had self-image goals. So these were goals meant achievement goals meant to like increase your resume or increase your own self-image, or contribution goals. And what she found was that those people in longitudinal studies that have more self-image goals, meaning goals like, I want to do this for me, or get this job, or make this amount of money, actually over time felt more disconnected, worse about themselves, and more anxious and depressed than those who had more compassionate goals or contribution goals. Contribution goals are things like, I want to solve this problem for someone else. I want to contribute to this need, or I want to do something about this thing that I think can be better for other people. And when we have more contribution goals than we do self-image goals, we tend to feel better about ourselves, less anxious and depressed. And the idea here is not that results aren't important. Profit, your paycheck, all those things are important, but it's important to understand that they're just indicators of something else. And the key is that we know that purposeful people tend to have a diversity of goals. So achievement goals are great as long as they're balanced out by contribution goals. So I always tell people, take a look at your goal portfolio and ask yourself, do I have more contribution goals or achievement goals? And how am I feeling right now? How are the people around us feeling? This is also true. There's some research going on right now in organizations that have more achievement goals versus contribution goals, and looking at engagement and looking at feelings of meaningfulness as well. So this is a good inventory to start developing that personal mindset. And that's really one of the most powerful parts, which is why I spent a lot of time on it, to doing this work. Because if you don't believe that you matter, it's easy for nothing to matter. So reframing some of those questions that you ask yourself, telling yourself stories of your impact, telling people around you in your organization how they matter is really powerful to then getting into really connecting to a bigger purpose. If you're a company right now, if you're in a company, if you're a leader, you may be asking, what's the difference between purpose, mission, and vision? I just want to clear this up before I go on and talk more about individual leadership purpose. But purpose is really why you exist. It's the human problem you exist to solve. Your mission is how you fulfill that purpose. So what do you do? And then your vision is, what would the world be like if you were done, if you completely fulfilled your bigger mission? But it has to start with this problem, this contribution. Otherwise, when we lose that, we can lose the reason to even have a mission or have a vision in the first place. So I want to just talk about how to uncover your purpose right now as an individual. And you can apply this to a company if you're an entrepreneur or working with a company. But there's three types of purpose. There's individual purpose. This is why the contribution you want to make. There's organizational purpose. This is the contribution why the organization exists. And then there's common purpose, which is the group of people together doing this bigger purpose and accomplishing that. And so purpose tends to arise from three areas. I tend not to overcomplicate this. So your purpose arises from the things that you love to do, the things that you're good at, and then the impact that those things make. So passion, these are the things that you lose track of time doing. So you might ask yourself at the end of each day, what did I love doing today? What did I lose track of time doing? These are the things like if a friend comes in or a coworker comes in that they have to, and they interrupt you, you kind of get mad that they interrupt you because you're in flow. This is what you love to do. The second is talent. This is what you're good at. So this is what other people ask you to do. This is what other people think you're really good at. And then the third key piece here is impact. So how do you want to use these strengths to impact other people? So the overlap of passion and talent. So when you ask those questions, what am I good at today? What do I love to do? You may find that for some, they're the same. They kind of touch each other. And that is where your strengths lie. Impact is what contribution those strengths make to other people. And when that comes together, you get to your purpose. Here's a template that you may try. You may try writing this down right now. So think about your passions and talents, and ask yourself, what is a verb? What's a word that I could use to bring those strengths to life? So for example, mine is very simple. My purpose is to help. Yours could be to support, to innovate, to analyze, to connect. And try not to get too caught up in this being your life's purpose statement, because purpose is crafted, it's not found. I encourage people to think of this as their first purpose statement, just getting the language out there that I have strengths that make a difference to other people. So my purpose is to what? What's that action verb to you? So mine is help. It's very simple. Who? So who are the people that you serve with your strengths? So my purpose is to help people. I know it's very general, but I do a lot of work with a lot of different types of people, so it makes sense for me. Yours could be a particular customer group, a stakeholder group, the people around you, your teammates, your family. So my purpose is to help people. Who is it for you? Who are you using your strengths to affect? And then finally, what will people be able to think, feel, and be, do, and have as a result of you being on your strengths? So if this is all too big for you right now, think about this. If someone left a conversation with you today, what do you want them thinking, feeling, or being motivated to do? So my purpose is to help people to realize their own significance. So what's yours? So take a screenshot of this, take a picture of this, and I encourage you after this session to take some time and ask yourself those three questions. What do I love doing? What am I good at? How do I want to make the world better with those strengths? I encourage you to do that on behalf of your organization if you're a leader. What do we love doing here? What are we good at here? What meaningful need can we solve? And state your purpose and keep it in your environment to keep you focused on it. And then the key part is connecting your daily tasks to that bigger purpose for yourself, or if you're leading a company, for the people around you. Now, one of my favorite stories is from when we launched the moon missions here in the US. And John F. Kennedy, who was the president at the time, wanted to land on the moon before the end of the decade. A big purpose, right? A huge vision. The problem is that he had over 300,000 people across the country working on very small parts of that big purpose, and many of whom would never see it happen. So what he did was every area at NASA, the space agency, had what was called a ladder to the moon, where every unit could see the big purpose to put a person on the moon by the end of the decade, but they could connect their weekly tasks to a tangible objective that was measurable, to another tangible objective that was measurable, to another tangible objective, and then ultimately were able to weekly discuss how what they were doing would help land someone on the moon, that bigger purpose. And one of my favorite stories from that era was when John F. Kennedy was about to give a speech launching the Apollo missions, and he went into a janitor's closet by accident and went into a mop room. And he went up to the janitor. He said, "Oh, what do you do here?" And the janitor very calmly got up, looked at the president, and said, "Mr. President, I'm putting a man on the moon." And then he went back to his work. This was not an accident. This was designed as part of NASA's culture. So, what is your moon mission? What is your bigger purpose? And what's your ladder to the moon? How is what you're doing today going to actually get you there? As an organization, do people know how what they do help deliver that bigger purpose? And then the final practice is, once you state that bigger purpose, is to make sure you're activating it, because no one really cares, like, right, why you say you exist unless you prove it every day. And there's a big gap between stimulation and transformation. So this idea of purpose, if you're inspired by some of this information, it is inspiring, but it's stimulating. Once we have this idea of purpose, we have to move to create new beliefs. We have to move to create new values that align with those beliefs. And then ultimately, our purpose is expressed through our habits. Habits are the behaviors we do daily, regularly, routine. And so, one of the best ways to start identifying purposeful habits is to ask yourself this question: what would someone with my purpose do? What would an organization with our purpose do? Or if purpose is a tough word to use because it's so big, what would someone who wants to make the contribution I want to make do? What would an organization who wants to make the contribution we're meant to make do here? And so one of the best ways to do that is create a purpose statement, then ask yourself, if we were delivering this every day, how would others feel? So what would other people feel like? So for example, if I were delivering my purpose every day, people would feel inspired, or they should. Who will you need to be? So how will you need to show up every day? So if people were feeling inspired, well, I would need to be appreciative of my own work, of them, of my own impact. And then if you were to be appreciative, if you were to prove that you were being these things you wrote down here, what would you actually do? So again, if I were delivering my purpose, others would feel inspired. So for others to feel inspired, I would have to be appreciative. To be appreciative, I'll have to reflect daily on the positive impact of my work. I encourage you to just, once you have your purpose statement, take 3 columns down on a piece of paper and write down, if you were delivering that statement regularly, how would others feel? Who would you need to be to get them to feel that way? And then what would you need to do to prove that you were being this middle column, and make them measurable? The middle column becomes your values, your identity. The third column becomes the habits that you'll commit to, how you make purpose actionable. And then the last part will be the results. These are the results of you being on your purpose regularly. You can do this as a company, on teams, as an individual, and it's incredibly powerful, because oftentimes when we're visioning, we just think of how we want to feel or what we want to be doing a year from now, but we don't think about what we need to do daily to get there and how it will align with our purpose. So again, just want to recap, and then we'll get into happy to answer any questions that you might have. The first piece is developing a purposeful mindset. Ask better questions. Ask questions that put your attention on your contribution, that you matter. The second is connect to your purpose and the purpose of whatever you're doing. So use that purpose statement template, create a bigger statement of what your contribution is. Don't let the anxiety of not knowing your purpose get in the way of that. And then implement habits. What will you do to prove that every day? And so if you have any individual questions, I'm going to put my email into the chat, but right now I'll stop and see if you have any questions, and I'm happy to connect with you all and answer any questions that you might have. Go ahead. Any questions, Michael? Do you have any questions? Oh, you're on mute. I think you're on mute.
On mute. Yep.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Good. So sometimes you start a particular task and you are full of passion for that task. Then it turns out that as and when you journey into the task, you sort of lose that kind of steel, and then you bounce back.
Yeah.
Does that mean that the task that you began with full of passion does not align with your purpose?
Yeah. So I'll make a distinction because I think you raise a good question. And there's a big difference. I think someone's not on mute, but there's a big difference between passion and purpose.
Right.
So passion, right, is the energy, the pleasurable energy you feel when you're doing what you're doing.
Yep.
Purpose is the contribution that the task has on other people.
Exactly.
So, for example, what can happen is we tend to overemphasize or over pursue passion without pursuing purpose. So, short-lived energy or motivation is usually a result of focusing on just doing things we're passionate about and not thinking about their purpose.
The purpose.
So, now let me tell you something. Do I get up every day and like want to run around and do everything with a ton of energy all the time? No, right? Right. I mean, but when we research people who do routine everyday work, like the janitors that we research, what we find is that they are able to cultivate a purposeful mindset that makes them feel more energized because they can say, yeah, this task might stink doing right now, but here's why it matters. And over time, you can craft that purposeful perspective. And I will say, you know, it's not to say that you should be just doing the tasks that you don't like over and over. It's that if you can learn to discern meaning where you are now, you can learn to do it wherever you want to go.
Good. So basically what you're saying is about how meaningful that task is to you is what will determine the purpose of the task. Okay.
And it's about just like, you know, I mean, I have 2 kids and a lot of my life is getting up and taking care of them, right? And that can become routine, but I have to stop sometimes and say to myself, you know, how I talk to my kid right now can affect how he thinks about himself.
That's true.
And it's taking those approaches to what you do captive so you don't just get into the routine. You know, do I like changing diapers? No, I don't like changing diapers. But do I know that I'm caring for him so that he can grow up and do what he's meant to do, and that changing diapers is part of that? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So a bigger picture, of course, will then take your attention off the smaller picture that may discourage you.
Yeah. Right. And it's long-term thinking too. If you're starting a company, it's the same thing. I mean, there's a lot of changing diapers in starting a company, you know.
That's true.
And you know, you can get so caught up into that. But you know, when I talk to like professional athletes, 85% of professional athletes' life, right, is doing routine drills over and over and over again, right? About 15% of their lives is actually performing it and getting all the energy from it. So that's that long-term view.
Okay. So a lot of things goes on behind the scenes. So it's just the tip of the iceberg that we see, but then beneath the iceberg, there are a lot of routines that goes on that makes that purpose sort of shine out there.
Yeah. And something I think happens like in companies is that oftentimes people, we just think someone's there for a paycheck, right? And so we treat them as that's all they're there for. We don't show them how their tasks make something else possible. We make it harder for them to see the bigger picture.
Okay. Right. Okay. Thanks. Any other person with a question? Zach is ready to answer your question based on the presentation he just delivered.
And you can chat it in too if you'd like.
Yep. Zach has provided his email. Right. Okay. Zach has provided his email address in case probably you have a question you don't want to share on this platform, you want to contact him in person, you can do so after the webinar. Thank you.
Yeah, please do.
So Zach, how if somebody want to get a copy of your book? I mean, I know it's on Amazon, and then which other platforms can they get copies to buy if they
Yeah,
want to?
it should be everywhere that you
No.
go. If you don't want to use Amazon, if it's not available in your country or wherever, but it should be around. There's Books a Million, there's BarnesandNoble.com. There's a lot of options, and if you go here, you can get to that as well. And there's a discussion guide there with some questions.
Okay.
And if you email me, if I can send you a workbook that goes along with this session that I just gave, that if you want to
Great.
craft
Okay.
a purpose statement, I'll send you a workbook as well
Okay.
that you can use too. So just email me, say you're on this webinar, I'll send it over to you.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Yep.
Yeah, of course.
Hi, I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, who's this?
Nathan,
Hey, good to meet you.
Yeah.
I want to find out, in our area here in Africa, you realize
Yep.
that an individual you see an individual to be acting as a good leader,
Yeah.
but when they get opportunity, when given the leadership position, they end up thinking about themselves.
Yes.
What really causes that? How can one just
What do I think? What?
How can one just forget about thinking about the organization and veer towards thinking about himself?
Well, it's not just Africa.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think you can see what's happening. I think you
Yeah.
can see what's happening here in the States, right?
Yeah. That's
so
true.
we all have the same human mind, no matter where we are, right? And we get what happens to human beings is, unfortunately, as we react to the world. And I think that the higher you get up into, if you look at that split, right, the why and the what, the higher you get up into a position, the more stuff you have to deal with, the more people are trying to lobby you. And the more I think that you're susceptible to the human instincts of greed, of reacting, of just trying to look good. And that split becomes wider, right?
That's true.
And I would say that most people learn, if you look at, at least in our school system, educational system in the US, we're taught to acquire and achieve for ourselves. I mean, you get a letter grade, you get a test score that measures your worth. We're sort of taught to believe that we don't matter unless we are successful. So you go about pursuing the what and the how, and then you forget about the why, which is all the people that rely on you.
Yep.
And I think it's a matter of sort of these questions, asking these questions, developing the habits of mind now after sessions like these, and maintaining, no matter how high you get, and to consistently asking who needs you.
Yep.
And making decisions based on that. What would my purpose do right now, instead of what would get me the most money from a lobbyist? That's it. That's the difference between having purpose and being purposeful.
Thanks for that.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. What's your name?
Yes. Hey, this is Noah. I'm in South Africa.
Hey, Noah. Hey, good to see you.
Okay, good.
Thank you. How are you guys?
Good.
I'm sorry. I think I got parts and pieces of the presentation because I was still somewhere. So network and all of that. So now I want to ask a question. I don't know if it's going to fit on the purpose and leadership discussion. My question is, are leaders born, made, or taught?
Yeah.
Well, so I come from psychology. So, and in psychology, we know that about 40% of people's own, for example, when we look at people thriving in life, about 40% is due to traits. So it's like extroversion, introversion, all that. But the rest is due to interventions from the environment. Wow. So from a scientific perspective, I think leaders are more made than they are born. And they're made through an environment that both you can create around you and in your head, but I think there's some traits that lend itself more towards leadership, psychologically. But what we know is that the environment has a big play in that.
Yeah.
So also, I would say that no matter what you believe about leaders being made or born, you can't deny that our societies create the leaders we have.
Okay. So I think basically, if I understand you quite correctly,
Yeah.
you are saying what Einstein said, that the environment inherits how we behave, how we think.
Yeah.
Now there's a question I think Brother Nathan asked on why do leaders tend to forget the purpose of them leading people. So let's say, like, for instance, here in South Africa, we are having this crisis of giving out tenders and 500 billion spent regardlessly so. So this would simply mean that the leaders we have were brought up in an environment that was not supporting their minds to actually think like leaders. And we put them on position of power because they're influential, I'm thinking.
Or I
Mhm.
would say that one of the things, the problem with our world system of how we think about leadership is that we rely on people to be morally good while incentivizing them not to be.
Not to be. That's
So we rely on individuals to be morally good by rewarding and incentivizing them not to be. So I would say that every leader is the result of a system of rewards and punishments. So like over time, right? Like that person who's recklessly spending, or the person who is not having any sort of policy around a global pandemic, that person is being rewarded. Like, for example, in our case, President Trump, and he's rewarded through votes by pandering to his base. So he makes decisions in that way. I'm just stating facts, like, of what is happening publicly, but and I think that's what happens. So I would ask, like, one of the things I would ask is, how is our system rewarding this leader for the behaviors we say we don't want?
So this is more of a behavior. How do you say it? A behavioral problem.
A systems problem too. Like,
it's a system. Yeah, it's more of a system problem, because
right,
the leader obviously is going to play to the tune of the populace or the citizen. Because if you do A, B, C, and you get a vote, obviously you do exactly what they want. But then in reality, maybe there are things that the leader is supposed to do. But if he decides to pursue that path, it may not go, or probably it may not get the attention of the citizenry, and they may not vote for him. So what most leaders do is just short-term targets. Try achieve short-term targets so that they get a vote and then stay in power.
In this
And
case,
that to me is the problem in Africa now, because we are always interested in winning the next election rather than putting the nation on the right path.
That's true. That's true. No, that's very much clear. Thank you, gentlemen.
No, it's a good question, and you can also think about it for yourself. Like, what's the system you create for yourself in life? Like, what do I reward myself for? And ultimately, like, what you reward yourself for is who you become.
Definitely.
And it's little rewards, like, oh, I think I did a good job because I got this or did this. And that's what your mind will slowly start seeking to do those behaviors. Right. That's why it's so hard to change, because especially as you get older, it's hard to change because you've gotten this system, right? I mean, that's why when someone gets into politics, wherever you are, the more they go through the political system, the older they get as a politician, and the harder it is to change. So, but I think it's possible. I don't want to end on a not hopeful note. I mean, we know it's possible to change beliefs. We know it's possible to change environments, reward systems, structures. But I do think it starts a lot of times with individuals too, of knowing who we're becoming.
Yep.
That's very much clear.
All right. So I think
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
In a scenario whereby I find myself in an organization whereby the manager has forgotten about his purpose, what is expected of we as employees to draw his mind back to why the organization exists?
Oh my gosh, that is the most common question I get.
Yeah.
And I still don't have a great answer for it, to be honest with you. Because it's hard. You know, when you put a star performer against a broken system, the system wins every time. And at the same time, I will say that we also have more control over our local systems than we give ourselves credit for. So if you have a leader that's a frustrating leader and you react to them by being frustrated, you become a frustrated leader.
Wow.
Okay.
You became a frustrated person.
Yeah.
So I think the one thing that you can control, and Viktor Frankl in his book called Man's Search for Meaning, he was a concentration camp prisoner. And he said between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our growth and our freedom. The ultimate human freedom is to choose our response to any given situation. So I would say that think about your responses to the organization, and are your responses any better than it? And one of the things is that you have team members, you have peers around you, you have tasks. We make meaning in our work between what we do, who we do it with, and mostly our direct supervisor. So I would, if you can, start there. Start thinking about your response to your tasks, the people around you. And over time, someone may say to yourself, that leader may say, gosh, what are they doing on that team? What are they doing? I mean, what's going on there? Now, if you're in a position to influence the team, you could start asking some different questions like, that slide I showed you, we can ask these everyday questions. Like from a boss perspective, if they're saying, okay, we need to get numbers up next quarter. You could say, if you're in a meeting, you could say, well, hey, how might we be able to contribute more to our customers to get those numbers up? Right. So it's a little question right there that you start shifting slowly the attention. Not that your boss is a toddler, but like my toddler, you start shifting their attention to that contribution, and you'll be surprised at how enriching the discussion can become if you start shifting those. So that's one thing. Focus on what you can control. The second thing is, if you're in a position where you can influence, start asking questions that slowly shift attention back to that contribution, and hopefully they'll feel it. They'll feel the difference in energy and output that way.
Yeah.
I know hope is not a good strategy, but
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. My name is Ben, and it goes to Mr. Zach.
Okay.
Okay. What I want to find out is on your journey of becoming a leader, you gave us 3 steps. Which of those was more difficult for you to consider on your journey, and how difficult was it for you, and how do you overcome that particular one, please?
Yeah, I would say the first one is very difficult for me still, developing a purposeful mindset. This pandemic, like I lost about half my business on a Friday afternoon because I do work with companies in person, consulting work.
Okay.
And a lot of engagements just fell away, right? And I immediately went to this reaction mode. So I was like, what do I do? I was frantic. I was panicking. I was on my phone trying to get these gigs rescheduled, right? And I remember I was picking my kids up from school and I forgot to pick them up. I was so wrapped into what I had to do. And I went into my kid's classroom and he came over and gave me a big hug and he's like, Daddy, can we just go home? And I said, yeah. And I realized like, he didn't care about my lost revenue. He didn't care about my gauge. No. He needed me there.
Exactly.
So I, as someone who studies purpose and meaningfulness, had hinged my identity on what I did, what I got for what I did, the money I made. And it sneaks up on you, right? And so the last 3 months for me has been really stopping and asking that question of like, who needs me right now to get through this? And that's where that question came from. And so I think that's been the hardest, is like, I don't want it to take a moment where I forget about it to realize it, right? Yeah. But I think that every day, if you can just think of 1 or 2 habits that can bring you back to the reason that you're getting up that day, to who needs you, to who do you affect that day, I think it can be really powerful. But like I said, if it can be very easy, and I know sometimes we don't even admit to it, that sometimes it can be very easy to trick ourselves into thinking we don't matter, or what we're doing doesn't matter right now, but you do. And if you can remember that, ask yourself some of those questions, is powerful. But that one's really hard, but I think is so essential. And so many organizations and people try to state a purpose without ever developing a purposeful mindset. And they start stating a purpose without ever developing purposeful habits. And either one of those, it's just, it's just statements. It doesn't really mean anything. So I would really work on that first one, because you'll find that there's purpose in even the most mundane things in your day. And once you can tap into that, that's what is the foundation, I think. But it's also hard. It takes a lot of time. It takes habit every day. Just like exercising, you don't want to exercise when you think you need to exercise. You want to exercise so you don't have to think you need to. Get to that moment.
Exactly.
That's good.
Right. Any other question?
Oh, there was a question that came in here. I just want to answer it. What should people do when the very people you want to help seem to not appreciate what you are giving them? I'm an educator and I believe in character education. Should I find myself in an environment where that's not appreciated? Oh, okay. So like the people that you're providing to, you don't think appreciate them. That's hard in education, but it also goes down to a purposeful mindset, right? The source of a river knows nothing of where it goes. Yeah. So, I think consistently reminding yourself that you're planting seeds, especially as an educator, that down the line, you may not even know that you're having that impact. It becomes more important to imagine that impact. So I think those questions around purposeful mindset are even more important there. And I will say, if you can go to a place where your purpose is clearly appreciated more, do that. But most of us don't have the privilege to just change our jobs right now. And I know that can be hard for a lot of people. So I think developing that mindset can really be helpful, especially in education.
Right. That's true. That's true. Okay. So is there any other question? If no other question, I think I would like to say a very big thank you to Zach. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for this wonderful presentation. Of course, we've learned a lot as to what purpose is and how to cultivate purpose. And I believe that from this presentation, we will know the essence of meaningful work.
Yeah.
You don't just stand up to say that I want to enter into this venture. You have to think about what you intend to achieve thereafter. Very important.
Yeah.
So what impact are you going to make? Don't just think about the short-term impact. Think about the long-term impact. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
Yep.
And thank you all. Thanks for being here.
Right. Okay. So I'll hand over to Nathan Nathan to give the concluding remark.
All right,
great.
So thank you everyone for joining us this honorable afternoon, morning, and evening, depending on which continent you find yourself at the moment. I know it's somewhere late in Australia, morning in US, late evening in South Africa. We are in the mid-evening. We are yet to get to the evening here in Ghana, where I find myself. Zach, let me say, Dr. Zach, thank you very much for the presentation. We really appreciate it so much. Mr. Michael Jensari, thank you for helping us get in touch with such a wonderful mind. It's been an amazing time this evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you find yourself. There's a saying that there are so many leadership skills and leadership styles, but it's up to us to know which one to apply. Today, I've come to realize that it's not about the styles or the leadership skills, but it's about the purpose you have as a leader. For an organization to grow, for your organization to grow, you need not to think about yourself, but you have to think about others. We've also learned that your contribution to others cannot be copied, but an innovation can easily be copied. So ladies and gentlemen, we've learned a lot. Let's help our organizations to grow. Together, you can make your organization grow. Together, we can all develop ourselves. Thank you very much, and hope to see you in our next webinar. And Dr. Zach, we'll be happy to have you more time because we realize that you can impart us a lot. So thanks to everyone for your time. We really appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, thanks.
So back to you, Mark.
And please, one more thing. I have something to say, a quick one.
Okay.
I'm hoping this could be organized probably frequently. This is the first time I'm joining. And I hope, I know I'm late, but I hope this could be organized more frequently so that we could also tell other people to join so that everybody will benefit. Thank you. That's all I've got to say. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay.